Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Andrew. So I was going to release an entire series this week, and then I filmed it, I edited it, I had it scheduled for release on YouTube, and then my brain got involved and I'm like, I don't know. I'm still on the fence about releasing the whole series. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to hopefully fairly quickly, I say fairly quickly, there's a lot of information to cover, but I'm going to fairly quickly summarize that series, and I'm going to leave a choice up to you guys. If you hear this video, understand the main points that I talk about has each one has a video in the series. So if you want more information, let me know in the comments below. Just make a comment, hey, I'd like to see the full series or whatever, or even if there's one specifically that you'd want to see more about, leave that comment below, and I'll release those. Now there's going to be a time limit on this, as I'll keep checking back as long as I'm doing my men and women series that I'm on right now. Once I'm finished that series, even if you ask, obviously I'm not going to be coming back that far. I'm going to be moving on to the next thing. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you want. And this series of videos was going to be basically debunking the patriarchy. Now, before I really jump into this, I do want to say that I'm not trying to really debunk the patriarchy. The patriarchy exists. It's part of the idea of what feminists believe the patriarchy is that I am going to debunk. So basic definition of what a patriarchy exists. It's a system in society where the father or the eldest male is the head of the household or the head of the family, and descent is traced through the male lineage or the male bloodline. That's all it is. Feminists go farther and say, therefore men have oppressed women throughout time. There's a logic jump. It's a logical jump to say that those things are connected, in my opinion, just because of the system. No system in and of itself is inherently oppressive. At least I can't think of any. Maybe you guys can. Comment below if you can. It's generally the people that are within that system that make it oppressive. It's how they use the system to their advantage that will make it oppressive or not. Have there been men that have oppressed women throughout time? Of course there have. Have there been women that oppressed men in time? Yes, there have. I mean, you can make the argument that women have oppressed men less than men have oppressed women, but then again, men have oppressed men more than they've oppressed women throughout time. So, who's oppressed? Generally, I do not believe it is a line between all men have oppressed all women. I believe it's more of a line of the men and women at the top of society have literally oppressed everyone else in society. So again, men and women at the top oppressing men and women that are the rest of society. But okay, I've talked to many feminists about this topic. It's something I'm very interested in. I love history. I'm very interested in this type of thing. So when I ask them, okay, after asking them to define the patriarchy, which you would think if you're arguing something about the patriarchy, you would know what the patriarchy is. It's sad how many don't. That's an easy thing to fix. You can just literally definition patriarchy on your phone, and they're all there. They're there. Now, admittedly, some of those, it's kind of sad that the woke movement has gotten to some of these websites and they've changed the definition. In some of those definitions, like the one I gave, some have added at the end of that, and it's oppressive. Well, again, no, the system is not inherently oppressive. It's who is using it to their advantage that would make it oppressive or not. But anyway, after I ask them about the definition of the patriarchy, I ask them examples of how the patriarchy has kept women down, or how the patriarchy has oppressed women. And they generally give three main answers, and then there are a couple of minor answers. Those are the topics that I talked about in each of my videos. The first one is the pay gap. I've already debunked that in a separate video. Go check that out. That's in the playlist of men and women, if you want to check that out. The second is that women were not allowed to work, and the third is that women didn't have the right to vote. On top of that, sometimes they also talk about the pink tax. So I'm going to very quickly go through those and very quickly kind of debunk them. And again, if you want the more in-depth versions of these videos, let me know and I will release them. Okay. So before I get into each of those specific topics, I want to point out something about human history that a lot of people don't seem to think about. For approximately 96% of all human history, humans have been basically cave people living in caves, hunting, gathering to survive. The men would hunt, the women would look after the children and gather food, and cook the food that the men brought back. That is 96% of all human history. Neither men nor women could really oppress each other all that much in that time frame, because if men and women didn't work together perfectly, the human race would have gone extinct. And it's very, very lucky that we didn't. And really the main oppressor during all of that was nature, whether it was like animals eating us, whether that was, for example, winters, you might freeze to death if it's too cold. That was how we were really oppressed during that time. So that's 96% of all of human history. So again, for 96% of human history, men did not really oppress women. Men could not oppress women. Women could not oppress men. They couldn't afford to, because if they did, everyone would die. It was such a struggle that, you had to work together in order to survive. So really what we're talking about here is we're talking about 4% of all of human history. Now, some say that 4% is the most important part of human history. I would just, again, point out that if it wasn't for that 96%, we wouldn't have that 4%. But there you go. That's up to everyone's perspective. That's just an interesting thought about history that I've always had. So really we're talking about a time when when civilization started to form. Now, in the early days, and I don't know the statistic offhand, I wouldn't be surprised if it's something like 95% of all people were farmers throughout time. I'm guessing. That's a number right off the top of my head. That would be my guess. It could be very wrong. So don't take that as anything more than that. That would be my guess on it, though. But that wasn't necessarily a job. It was in a sense, but in a lot of sense, it was. In a lot of ways, it wasn't as well. So there were some jobs back in that time. You would have some specialties like shoemaking, because that was a difficult thing to do. Metal work, again, that was people that would build structures, stuff like that. But for the most part, the vast majority of people were farmers. Now, ask a farmer today if his family helps out on the farm, and that person will say, of course they do, because there's so much to do. And that's including modern conveniences like tractors, which didn't exist for these people back then. So, of course, everyone worked on the farm, the men, the women, and the children, all of them. You were lucky if you had a horse, let alone no one had a tractor. Everything was done by hand. So, of course, everyone worked. And it wasn't like they got paid for their work. They would trade some of their crops, for instance, if they needed something like from the blacksmith. And again, when it comes to oppression in this time frame, it was the kings and queens at the top that said, oh, by the way, you have to give me this amount of your crop that you harvested. And that's how that oppression worked. And again, it was kings and queens doing that to everyone else. So it wasn't the men doing that to the women. It wasn't like there were just women farmers and the men were like, no, you can't do that because you're a woman, you're not allowed to work. No, it was a fight still for survival, because they needed that extra crop for the winter months that they couldn't grow anything. So again, it was still fighting to survive. It's just a different form of fighting to survive. And if you don't work together, you die. And so it didn't make any sense, even at that time, for most men to oppress most women. Again, some men oppressed some women, but then again, those men also oppressed men. Some women oppressed women, but they also oppressed the men. And it had to do more of you were in power or you weren't. It wasn't a man versus a woman thing. Okay. Really, we see more of an explosion of jobs throughout time, obviously, as technology gets better. Now, I'm not talking about like computer technology or what we see as modern technology. I just mean technology in general. As technology advances, you need more types of jobs to help maintain that technology. And really, the major explosion happened during the Industrial Revolution, when factories opened up and the amounts and types of jobs just absolutely exploded. So really, we are talking about a tiny, tiny fraction of all of human history here. But that's the part that most people want to cover. Fair enough, I understand that. It is the most interesting part of history is modern day, to back a little tiny bit, maybe that 4%. But we're really, like I said, only talking about a minor part of history. Okay. So from this point in the video, unless I specifically mention another country, assume I'm talking about the US here. All the statistics I have are for the US. The Canadian example basically shadows the US one anyway, and same with a lot of Europe and stuff like that too. So I'll stick to the US because that's what my statistics are from, unless I specify otherwise, of course. Okay. So in a lot of people, men, women, everyone, believe that women really only started working World War I. This was because the men had to go out and fight in the war, and so someone needed to still run the factories, and so women joined the workforce at that point. When the men who survived came back, they took their jobs back, women stopped working again, and then World War II happened, same thing, and then it was only after that, in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, that women really started entering the workforce again. That's true to an extent. All of that stuff did happen. However, women were working already before then. By 1850, 50% of all women were working. They were a part of that workforce. Now, before World War I, let me ask you this question. If a woman didn't have to work, why would she want to? Was it that she was brainwashed into thinking that she couldn't work, that it's a man's job to work? Or was it that part of the privilege of being a woman at that time was that they stayed at home and they raised the kids? Because, by the way, that's a full-time job. On top of that, they also looked after the house, which is another full-time job. So why would they need another job going out and making money? Especially at a time in history when most families could afford just for the man to go and work. And so the woman wouldn't have to go and struggle in the jobs, because, you know, jobs weren't great back then for anyone. It was only the very rich that had great cushy jobs, even if they worked at all. And most other people struggled in whatever job they had. So why would men want women to struggle like that, especially if they were raising the children and looking after the household? They didn't have to, and so they didn't. Most of the women that worked at that time, I'm sure some of them did by choice. However, the vast majority, it was because they had to. Either their husband was not making enough to support their household, or their husband had passed away and or died. And they were basically left, and they had to work in order to survive. Again, why would you want to work if you don't have to, especially when you're looking after kids? Now, were there some jobs that were not available to women? Yes, of course there were. Is that a form of oppression? Yes. However, I would put this caveat beside it. How many women actually wanted to really work those jobs at that time period? The answer, by the way, is not zero. I'm not saying that I even believe that there should have ever been a point where, well, this job is only a male job. There are some. Coal miner, for instance. I wouldn't want women working in a coal mine. It's if you know anything about coal mining, it's horrible. I wouldn't want men working in a coal mine, let alone women. But someone had to. It's very, very heavy, very, very, I mean, you would inhale coal dust into your lungs. It was brutal. So I wouldn't necessarily want a woman working that. But if we're talking about things like doctors, lawyers, stuff like that, yeah, I don't think that there should have been any reason that a woman couldn't do it. But again, the question is how many women really wanted to do it. The answer to that, by the way, is not zero. There were some women that wanted to do it. It's very hard to know how many women would have wanted to do it but were told they couldn't versus how many women didn't want to do it. That type of statistic is impossible essentially to calculate. But women were working to an extent. The first female professional journalist, her name is Anne Royal, I'll put that up here. She started working as a journalist in 1819. The reason she started working is because her husband died and a jury found that there was something wrong with his inheritance, and so basically she lost his inheritance, and so she had to work and she became a journalist. And that was again in 1819, I believe 1819. It was either 1818 or 1819, but I'm pretty sure it was 1819. The first female self-made millionaire, aka she worked and made her own money. It wasn't her husband's money. It wasn't inheritance that she was given. She started working. Her name was Madam C.J. Walker. Again, I'll put it here. And she started working in the late 1880s, and sometime between 1910 and 1919, she became a millionaire. She, by the way, was also African American, just to throw another wrinkle onto this story. And she employed thousands of people by the time she passed away in 1919. So there were women that worked. There were women that were very successful. So was there oppression? Yes, there was a little bit. Thankfully, there were some very brave women that took it upon themselves to knock down the barriers in certain job fields. But there's one question I have to ask, and it's to me this is a flaw in the thought pattern of this argument. The argument is basically, well, women were oppressed back then, so women are oppressed now. Okay, well, it's 19. Oh, I'm living in the past apparently. No, it's 2023 now. And so my question to you is a simple one. In 2023, what job can a woman not get? What job can a man get that a woman cannot get? Let's say it properly, Andrew. Well, that's the question. The answer, by the way, is I don't think there is one. Admittedly, there are some. Like, for instance, it's very unlikely that a female is going to become part of the NHL anytime soon, the hockey league here in Canada and the U.S., or any sports team for that matter. However, there are female leagues that were created so that women could play. So they could play in those leagues. And actually, depending on what type of job you're talking about, because of things like affirmative action, women have advantage over men. There are being men passed up for jobs that they are way more qualified for because a company would rather hire a woman and increase diversity versus hiring the most capable person. Personally, I generally believe that it should be the most capable person hired for said job, but that's just not how the world works right now. So again, how are you oppressed today? Women were oppressed in the past in many ways. So were men. I'm guessing 99.5% of all people, men and women, were oppressed in the past, and it was only a slight minority of people, the ones at the top, as I've said before, that were oppressing everyone. So how are women oppressed today when it comes to what job they can get? In fact, there are certain jobs that pay way more for women than they do for men. In certain adult entertainment industries, for instance, they are open way more, and access is way more for women than it is for men. So how are you oppressed? Now, I'm not saying to join those industries, by the way, because I'm going to talk about that in another video. Fast money has dire consequences for your future, in my opinion anyway. But how are you oppressed?